Welcome back to the Why Not Podcast, a podcast about serious stuff in an unserious way. My name's Caleb Todd.
And I'm Thomas Marshall. We are back again for another episode.
Oh, this is episode 2.
It is. This is.
Who would have
We're doing things. Who would have thought? Not me.
Not me.
I think I've used that Paul Rudd meme at least twice in conversation, and I don't know if that makes me a Gen Z or like what. I don't know where that puts me.
I feel like that puts you more on like the millennials. Like that's not like I don't know that that's necessarily like a meme that the kids are with. You know,
they're not like that's like a 30-year-old meme. That's like, okay, this was funny, so I'm gonna use this as a GIF now.
It's like the type of meme that you use whenever you're talking to other parents about their kids.
Oh, 1000%. Yeah. At the parent-teacher conference. Yeah. And,
who would have thought Stacy was going to get all B's this semester? Not me.
Not me. If I'm there, I don't think I want to be there. Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about something neither of us was overwhelmingly well-versed in, I don't think, going into this week.
I don't know too much about the topic.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be talking about tourism, specifically in South Carolina today. So, Thomas, what do you know about tourism? What do you know about it in the state? What are your thoughts about it?
In the state, I know South Carolina, to be a southern state, tourism is definitely traditionally booming. I know this is a 2020 into 2021 are going to be some very different years just due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But, you know, we have a huge hold on. We're going to cut this out.
Oh, I'm not cutting this out.
So South Carolina has a huge flurry of beaches all on the coast. So we have Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head. And so we definitely get a lot of tourism from there.
Right.
Fun fact, apparently, I did not know this can add to the show, is Disney World had a chance to be in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, one of the final 3 places was in Orangeburg. And so that's just crazy to think about.
Imagine how much different life would be.
life would be very different if we lived in the backyard of Disney World. Yeah. I couldn't imagine.
It would just be a different corporation, riding the backs of a bunch of citizens.
That's it. Just another really not so great thing that needs to be talked about more often, honestly.
But yeah, so tourism is a huge part of South Carolina's economy. It's like that's the reason that we're talking about it today. In 2016, it was $19 billion worth of the total economy. Just to put that in perspective, 33 million is like natural resources and stuff, which most of South Carolina is rural land or like land of like forests or, the beaches or whatever. A lot of our economy comes from that. But a big portion of like our total economy is this tourism, right?
Right.
And as of 2020 or 2019, so this is before the pandemic, it accounted for 22.6 billion of our economic output.
Wow.
So
that is huge.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it's a huge part of the economy, but it's also a huge part of like the state's identity, right?
Yes, I agree. Anytime you think of South Carolina, a lot of times on a national level, they're going to show the beaches and the golf courses, like tons of golf. We have the RBC Heritage, the famous golf tournament is down in Hilton Head. So there's
Hilton Head.
Hilton Head. Yeah, no, there's a lot of different attractions that people want to come to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so and with that, like Charleston, a couple of years ago, it might still was like named like the top tourist destination in the world. Going against like really famous like Parisian cities and stuff like that.
Wow.
So like people like the idea of South Carolina. They like coming here. A nice little family vacay,
I do love that you framed it as the idea, because I think that's a great way to frame it.
Yeah. So we've got Charleston, the state's former capital. That's now, probably the main tourist destination in the state. Very historically considered to be the tourist destination in the state, I guess, or like it's based on like a historical context. And then you've got Myrtle Beach, which is very much based on its natural resources, right? It's on the waterfront, right. And then they've built this like commercial consumerism around it.
They have.
And then like also golf courses, which is also the main sell in Hilton Head. But yeah, all these economies, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head, a bunch of other ones, Greenville's turning into more of a tourist destination.
Yeah, it
Colombia,
is.
it's not meant to be a tourist place, but it is, it's got
Yeah.
some things that are built up, the breweries and stuff that are there.
Right. No, I
Um,
agree. I think has been a little stagnant in its growth since the 90s. That's
mhm,
what I hear a lot from just my parents and from
right.
other folks around the city. But I think it had the potential to be almost like Greenville, but it just kind of didn't measure up throughout some business decisions.
Right. So, between all those different places, especially along the coast, a huge portion of South Carolina's economy is dependent on tourism, right?
Right.
So why does this matter? Why do we care that there's so many tourist destinations based around these big cities in the state, right? You have to like look at the historical context for a lot of these things, right?
Absolutely.
So with the blatant history of racism that has, consumed South Carolina for so long, you kind of have
Yes.
to look at that through, you have to look at the tourist industry through that context, right?
Right.
With the history of like repression and exploitation, we're still seeing that today. It's just taken a different kind of form.
Yeah. I definitely, I think you bring up a great point in that. To be a booming industry, there has to be some type of underlying historical context where people are exploited through that. And
Right.
I think it's an important part to bring up that. I don't think a lot of business folks are willing to have that tough conversation.
Right. So like let's look at tourism in Charleston. How many times have you ever visited Charleston specifically?
Yes. The last time I've been to Charleston was in 2016, around 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
for a preview day when I was possibly going to College of Charleston for
Right.
school. But that's the last time I was there.
So you were like near King Street. You were like towards all like the
Yeah.
the fun stuff downtown.
Right.
What
Yeah. King Street. Yeah.
what are your like memories of that? What stood out to you while you were down there?
Yeah. So I remember, my way I look at Charleston brings me back to two different memories. One is going to school for field trips, and
Right.
we would go to Charleston to different various places. And I don't think we necessarily went to any plantations because that's a whole other thing that I'm trying to figure out where I stand about that. But we did go to visit historical sites and see a
Right.
tour of the city, and they framed it as this hospitality place, Civil War era type
Right.
memorabilia and things like that. That's kind of the framing we got, and
Mhm.
then they take us for lunch on like the nice ritzy kind of parts of Charleston with the
Right.
nice shops and stuff. So that's kind of my memory of Charleston.
Right. So you hit on two important points. You hit on the fact that a lot of South Carolina's, or a lot of Charleston specifically, like the touristy parts of Charleston are based off of historical events that happened in the city, right?
Correct.
Which is like almost anywhere else, right? Like you're not going to go to
Right.
Boston and not see where Paul Revere left or whatever, right, on
Yeah.
his ride, right? Or you're not going to go to Philadelphia and not see the Liberty Bell.
Right.
But Charleston is unique and like infamously unique in the fact that a lot of their historical sites are built on the institution of slavery, right? So one of the biggest, arguably the biggest tourist destination down in Charleston is the old slave market, which is now just called
Yeah.
the Charleston Market, right? And
Right,
they,
right.
it's the same building that was standing in, or the same it's the same place that was standing in the 1700s, right?
Right.
So it's kind of, they've turned the market into this place where you have local artisans and you have like local restaurants feeding people, but there's no look introspectively at like the fact that this is literally a place where people used to be treated like animals, right? They used to be
Right.
treated like they weren't human.
Exactly.
And there's economic profit for both the city and for all those vendors and stuff. And there are vendors that are people of color. There are vendors that like probably from the north probably don't know anything about the history of the
Mhm,
building.
mhm.
But that's just one of the things that like we could just put a plaque somewhere. We could like have someone talking, and don't get me wrong, there's probably a plaque somewhere, but I've never seen it. And I go to Charleston.
Yeah.
I go down there at least like 3 or 4 times a year.
Right. And I doubt that they're marketing it to really retell those stories. And I think we're bringing up an important part of how do we tell African American history. I think it's super important, especially
Right.
in the state that we live in.
Right.
And doing that due diligence is super important. And we've seen it everywhere. Higher ed institutions do it. They mass history constantly.
Right.
So like how do we be able to tell that history is one of the most important parts of the way we, kind of reckon with it and move forward and really get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And then on top of that, Charleston is most associated with like the idea of the low country, right? This place that is under the sea level, but that is historically the place where most plantations were, right? Mm-hmm. You have like places like Boone Hall, where I think a scene from The Notebook was like filmed or something, right?
It is, yeah. And I think that's a national view of like, oh, like it's a nice,
it's a pretty place, you know. You go, you tour with your school group, or you you know, you go on this guided tour where we don't really talk about how bad of a person the slave owner was. We just talk about like the living conditions of the slaves, and you talk about what they did in a day, you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, there's even a Clemson professor who took a trip to a similar place like Boone Hall, mm-hmm. and they were calling the former enslaved people like servants.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the true history of it. And so that's tons of ways we need to do better.
Right. And Boone Hall now is like a place where they have an oyster roast every year, right? I'm sure major bring for like outside communities, you know, outside of South Carolina, and like where the Boone Hall horror house, haunted house is, you know, like these are things. It's a place where people were used to literally be enslaved. Yeah, they're still pretty. They still have like a fundamental use, but can't we reframe it a little bit?
Absolutely.
You know, so like kind of Charleston is just a place that was built on the slave trade, right? It was a place that was built on the backs of Africans who were forcibly brought here and weren't allowed to leave until 1863, right? And that's not even true.
Exactly. Exactly. That's not even true. So I guess our question is, how does this kind of refer back to tourism and this start in Charleston specifically?
Well, now we market these sorts of things as like a reason to come learn the history, right?
Right.
But then whenever we're teaching the history, it's not as clear who the villains were or who the you know, or like what was actually going on. It's, you know, it's kind of masked under this like historical context without doing that introspection, right? Like people come to Charleston to see the old market. They come to see another thing that I was going to touch on. They come to see like Fort Sumter, where the Civil War started, you know, and we don't really talk about the fact that like, and that's even in like a glossy term, right? And that's just the South generally. We look at, a lot of people look at the separation from the Union as like, states' rights and all that shit.
Yeah.
And,
we frame it that as just not true at all.
And I think neither of us thinks that states' rights was really the issue there.
Oh yeah, not even.
Seems like it was just a fucking excuse.
Yep, that's it. Truly.
But like the tourism industry is based off of all these events, you know, that are framed in a way that makes South Carolina look better than it actually was historically, right? It's built a lot on workers who are people of color who aren't given as fair of a wage as they probably deserve. You know, a lot of times it's in the summer, it's in 120-degree heat, you know, getting paid $7.50 an hour or whatever, because that's our state's minimum wage.
Exactly. And I would love to, I think you're bringing up some good points. I would love to like research and find out more about the local artisans and the folks that are actually working there. Is it, because I don't know where I'm at. Is it this place of really, do we put Black businesses there and kind of pour back into them and have this reinvestment of the community? Right. Or on the other side, do we just really kind of do away with the entire thing? And kind of what does that look like? I think if you do it in the correct way, you could really, you co-create with the folks that have been like, you get descendants of former enslaved folks and people like that at the table to have this conversation. I think that's important. But how we frame this, I think, is really crucial to continuation of that entire type of business and conglomerate.
Right. Yeah. And even just like outward like impressions of like the industry down in Charleston, you know, it's a lot of talk about like, come see the slave market, come see, you know, the old market, but it's not like, it's hard to find like talk about what actually happened there. I was doing research for this article. It wasn't as up front and center as you would expect it to be. Right. And
that's the problem. Yeah, and that's what doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. So Charleston, based the roots in that history, plus like the fact that we stole the lands from indigenous people, and that doesn't seem to ever be talked about. At all. South Carolina stole the lands from indigenous people,
which we could have a whole nother episode on that.
But yeah, so moving on to Myrtle Beach, right? Myrtle Beach is probably the place that most markets itself as like we're a tourist place. Like we want you to come visit Myrtle Beach because it's Myrtle Beach, right? We don't really care about the history too much. We have Broadway on the beach, right? Like have this
Broadway on the beach,
have these really cool things. The beach, beautiful, right? Even though it's not beautiful.
We have 2 Tanger outlets.
Yeah.
Not just one, but we have 2 of them
if you can get
one place.
If you can get slightly worse clothes for like slightly less prices, why wouldn't you come do it at 2
why
different
wouldn't
Tangers?
you go? Like that's insane to me. Like I don't think we think about that, but I don't know what's the need for 2 premium, they're not premium outlets, but just like 2 outlet malls like that. I don't know.
Well, if the one Nike store doesn't have what's in stock, then maybe the other one does.
The other does.
Yeah, and maybe I'm on my day 4 of my trip to Myrtle Beach. Already did a round of golf. What am I going to do now?
Exactly. Go and buy more stuff from Nike. No, yeah. I think that's a great point that you make of Myrtle Beach. We don't talk about its history at all. And Charleston, of course, has a historic touch, the cobblestone streets and all the things that they kind of sell. But with Myrtle Beach, we are purely tourism. Yeah, and that is what you come here for.
And like I was looking up Myrtle Beach, and there's not much like talk about like what it used to be. It's much more, we are what we are now. And I guess it's our jobs to think about that and see what we think. So I think Myrtle Beach is interesting because it is on its face like an exploitation of the beach, right? It's an exploitation of this natural resource, right? What used to be a vibrant ecosystem, now polluted. Sand dunes are going away a little bit, or are receding significantly, probably. Damage, pollution to the water, probably hurting the ecosystems that are, just a few miles off the coast. Right. And that's unique to places like Myrtle Beach, places like even parts of Charleston are kind of like that, right? Isle of Palms or Folly Beach. Folly Beach is it's dirty, Yeah,
no, it is. No, even just the whole stretch of the Atlantic Ocean is very, like the water is dark, much, much darker than you would the Pacific Ocean or some other natural resource like that.
Right, which is just sad more than anything, right? It's something that 1 could be avoided, 2, we're not taking the proper steps to reverse, right? So that's my nitpick with the natural resources.
For sure.
Always nitpick on the natural resources.
Oh, have to. That from our climate activist Caleb Todd.
Yeah. But I think the almost as depressing, if not more depressing side of this is how horribly they just treat their workers.
Yeah.
So Horry County, Horry, is the county that Myrtle Beach is located in. And it is ranked second to last in the nation in average weekly pay for for average income, basically I think it's for a family. Yeah, it's for a family. So on an average week, a family only brings in $652, right? And that's second to last.
No way.
That's second to last in the nation. And a place where cost of living compared to other places in the state is a bit higher, right?
Yeah. No, it makes sense due to the higher property taxes with the tourist industry. That's insane.
Right.
652 is insane.
Yeah. And that was as of 2019. So that's not too out of date, and I assume, we'll talk about the pandemic a lot more in a couple of minutes, but I assume that's only gone down, right? And if you're not getting people proper unemployment or proper protection, that's, the desperation that comes with making that sort of a low wage whenever you could be getting a lot higher one if people just took, people into consideration.
That is super frustrating.
Yeah. So I think it's just sad how horribly they're treating workers who are, might not have another industry to work for because the tourism industry just takes up such the impetus there, if that makes sense.
Right. When I'm reimagining myself going to trips on Myrtle Beach and I'm driving down that street and I'm seeing shops and I'm seeing boutiques and hotels. I know hotels is a huge part of that industry and that's what I'm just kind of seeing, and that's all I'm seeing in malls and golf courses, and that's really what makes up Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Right. So, and a lot of these are big corporations.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's hotel chain number 1, hotel chain number 2, probably run a lot of those hotels,
Yes.
And then a lot of the small boutiques are probably like national chains that are actually like just kind of pop up, don't really care about the worker that much.
The amount of Holiday Inn Expresses that I've seen is just insane.
Yeah. And in this sort of a system where it's not necessarily the most skilled positions, right? Like you don't have to have a bachelor's degree to do a lot of this kind of work. People are treated like objects. It's awful. If you're a cog in the machine, and if you don't want to work or if you're not working as efficiently as we want, then you're out, you're fired, right?
Right. And I'm sure there's not necessarily like a union or folks to kind of band around to have some of that protection with a lot of these jobs.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We live in a right to work state, right? So that means in a lot of places you're required to join the union, right? And that's how that's how you're able to fight more for like the expansion of workers' rights generally.
Right.
That's not the case in South Carolina. If anything, you're extremely dissuaded by the corporation, by the company to join the union.
Right. That's sad. That is frustrating.
And you can there's retribution. If you join the union,
right, exactly.
There can be action taken against you.
Right.
So just a fun little note.
Yeah. These conversations are the ones that make me cynical about things because it's tough. Like it gets me down, and like I don't see the faith in humanity as we're searching to look for.
Yeah. This conversation is one that's going to be hard to turn around, right? Because I want us to be like happy and laughing and stuff, but I can't see a easy path forward right at this moment, right?
Yeah, and that's the realness of it.
So why do you think? We've gone over some of the reasons why South Carolina has become so centered on its tourism industry. Like, why do you think that's happened? Like, why didn't we decide to invest in like a infrastructure economy or in more of a manufacturing space? Why did tourism become front and center, do you think?
I don't know. It seems like South Carolina. It seems like South Carolina just used its natural resources that they saw around, but I think with a lot of things back in the day, they did not think about the future implications that using these natural resources would have,
right,
and probably weren't taken care of as well. And then when we think about it, we're just not an industrial city. Mm-hmm. We're not like the Pittsburghs and the Detroits, and we don't have kind of those big manufacturing companies here. There's Boeing, that came up as recently though, but there's not really, and there's the BMW plant in Greer, but there's not really a lot of those strongholds that people can find jobs for.
Right. Yeah, so I think that this became the industry because it was easy. It was what was, we to a certain extent, this is going to sound crude, we had already done the slavery. No,
it's the truth.
What I mean?
It's the truth. It's the brand.
Right. The state had already invested, most of its 260 years of its history in the institution of slavery. Why wouldn't you just keep building on that?
Right. It's the continuation.
We already have all these beaches. Why don't we just build like places for other people to come and degrade the land?
Exactly.
And it does make sense. I don't think it's unlogical. Maybe in like the 70s and the 80s to think, let's invest in this tourism thing, and like let's really just give people a place to go for their vacation. Not get too deep into it. Like let's not try to repair our relationships with our own local communities. Let's instead invest in these outside communities that are going to put more money into the economy.
Right. And it reminds me so much of, I think, what my gripe is on like policies and different things. And this is just any policy. Like on the surface level, it sounds really great and it can really like have a great idea. But then when you make it more complex and more nuanced, like any topic is, it's like, we could have went about this in a different way.
Right. And South Carolina is always like to exploit everything that they can. It's a conservative state in both the most literal and the most political sense, right? Like people like to keep doing what they've been doing. So if you can't have slaves anymore, why don't you just why don't you have sharecroppers instead, right? And then if you can't have sharecroppers anymore, why don't we just use the land to trick other people into thinking it's pretty, right?
Right.
It's the MO for the state, right? I don't think that needs too much explaining.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah. So, and the reason this came up into my mind is like, this is podcast number 2. Why are we getting into tourism randomly?
Yeah.
What happens whenever there can't be tourism? Right.
Yeah. And we, there's this thing called the pandemic that has happened where we're seeing this shift of places are closing down and we don't have the bustling summer tourism time where everyone comes to South Carolina and comes to the beach. We don't have that this year.
Right.
So what, I guess that's a question I have for you is what does that look like, and what has the industry look like within this time?
Yeah, it's been a bad time.
Yeah.
I don't think
To put it plainly.
Yeah, it's been a bad time. I don't think that I think South Carolina was one of the least set up to handle a crisis like this, right?
Yeah.
We've got a population that's distrusting of government in the first place. We've got a
Correct.
population that's like not particularly willing to take a step back and like act in a communal sense. Like the individualism of America runs deep in the South, right?
Yes,
It runs deep in South
entirely.
Carolina.
A part of me wishes that I thought we were to this more collectivism mindset where, the hospitality would come in. It's like, oh, you have empathy for one another. And that's a whole nother conversation of how even like racism looks in the South, and just put it like how 2020 racism and 2021 racism looks like in the South. But I thought there was more of that kind of collective action that we've been speaking about in the past episodes.
Right.
But there does not seem to be.
Right. So the tourism industry is down specifically 43%
Wow.
from last year. At this time last year, we're down 43% of where we were.
Wow.
So that's huge, man.
That is.
$5.3 billion down,
Wow.
according to tourism economics.
Wow.
So how we have that source in there.
Yeah, and that's troubling.
And that's
That really
devastating
is.
for people. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about the small businesses that are on the coast and the people that want to start something up or have those jobs, I don't like, where do you go after that? Especially
Right.
when you've made your living in Myrtle Beach for years, you're depending on that summer to come. You're depending on those checks to come through. Like,
Right.
that's definitely tough.
Yeah. So like with the pandemic happening, it's just kind of, and then the fact that there was only one $600 stimulus check for each taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
9 months ago now. And well,
Right.
now there's a second one coming,
Yeah,
but
but people still won't be able to pay the rent on time,
Right.
and things like that, and yeah.
the eviction moratorium was set to expire on the 31st. I think that they
Right.
passed an extension.
I believe they did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly, but I believe they did.
Yeah. And then unemployment is not a good system in South Carolina. It's hard to get unemployment in the first place. And we live in this world where like it seems like every person's opinion is, well, if they're not working, they don't deserve it. Right.
Right. It is very much of
doesn't-
this.
And whenever a pandemic hits and people literally can't go work in the hotel that they used to work in, or
Right.
they can't work at the little boutique that they used to work in, or the restaurant on 3rd and 5th shut down
Right.
that I worked at for the past 10 years. I was a chef, but now I'm not. Right.
Exactly.
So that's when it really becomes an issue.
It does. I saw a tweet the other day. It said, and I love the way it framed it. It was like, let's stop the framing that no one who earns a paycheck should be in poverty.
Right.
How about we just say no one should be in poverty?
Right.
Because no one should be in.
Yeah.
And it's that plain and simple, but
Yeah.
it's not oversimplifying the complex situation, but it should be at its simplest form that.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of with the pandemic. It's just been it's been calamity for like people who already were being taken advantage of. 652 in Myrtle Beach, right? People who are already being taken advantage of now got the brunt of a crisis that they had no control over. And then
Right.
instead of instituting effective solutions, even on a state level, having a mask mandate. I still don't think there's a mask mandate in the state.
Yeah, there still isn't, and that's a tough thing because I think about this pandemic and we talk about what it's done to tourism, but I also think about the other crises now that have happened in South Carolina. I think about Hurricane Hugo in 1989.
Right.
I think about the Columbia floods back when I was in high school in 2015.
Mhm.
I think about what were the ramifications of that. Of those crises, but they just maybe weren't talked about enough. But we're gonna see the ramifications of the COVID-19.
Yeah, and it's going to be an issue for people. People aren't going to recover from this easily. We're still in a recession, and as of right now, it's not getting better.
Right.
And we're not helping people in the way that. And now we're not helping people in the way that they need to survive. Right. And you hit on a good point, and it's one I was going to transition to. Hurricanes are going to get worse.
Yeah.
right? They are getting worse. We've been lucky this year to not be hit in the state, but the effects of a hurricane that severely damages parts of Myrtle Beach or seriously damages historical monuments or historical places in Charleston, or like
Right.
completely ruins a golf course in
Yeah.
Hilton Head. Why can't I remember
Hilton Head,
Head?
It's a place I've actually never been to.
No one does.
To be from South
no,
Carolina.
no, yeah, you gotta
Yeah,
be like,
it's no one. It's
you
just
gotta
like
be,
I feel like
you gotta be really upper class and white to go to.
you do. That's what I was gonna say. I was like,
Hilton
you gotta be rich and white to be able to go to Hilton.
Yeah, like really rich too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No one whose family makes less than $500,000 a year goes to Hilton Head for just a fun little weekend. You got to be a member of the club.
You do. The people who are going to Hilton Head need to be worried about Biden's tax rate.
And they don't need to be worried. They're just irrationally scared.
Exactly right.
He's going to make us pay less taxes than we were paying before.
What?
He's
Crazy.
Before Trump. Sorry, that was a
before
bad,
Trump. Yes.
rough take.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I think we all understand.
Yeah, we all know. We all know. We all know. But and then on top of that, hurricanes are going to be getting worse, but also climate change is happening, and we're going to see sea level rise. It could literally get rid of the beaches. We might not have. Might not have one of our most cherished natural resources anymore, right?
Yeah.
Or some estimates say 70 years from now, Charleston could be completely underwater. It's that low under sea level.
Yeah, and those are conversations that I think we're having a lot, and I think that's even one reason we started these podcasts.
Right.
Were to just really get those conversations to the forefront of media to say this is super important. If we don't do this, if we don't respond well in a crisis, South Carolina is not going to be the place it was, or that your homes are not going to be there.
And I don't think South Carolina is the place where we're going to be able to build like in the worst case scenario, right? Say we start cutting emissions, we start like start getting things to like some level of neutrality, right?
Right.
Even then, we're going to see sea level rise, right? And one of the things that's been mentioned is basically building a wall.
Yeah.
Build the wall.
I hate that anytime you just say those words, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like a negative reaction.
But like, it's basically building in the most like simple terms I can think to imagine. It's building a wall around Charleston up high enough that it's preventing water. It's basically like a dam type of situation.
Okay.
But like it's much more efficient. I don't know how to explain it. Completely.
Okay.
It's almost like a levee situation.
The levees in like New Orleans, and you'll see that. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Just like in a much more wide, expansive. That's going to take trillions of dollars if we get to that point.
Yeah,
right.
It will. Yeah.
So yeah, these are all things to be worried about. If another pandemic hits, we're hopefully we're getting out of it now. Hopefully, essential workers are safe, and then hopefully the economy picks back up a little bit afterwards. But we're still going to have to, if there's another pandemic, or if Hurricane Jaylene,
whatever the next one is,
we're gonna get hit again. We're in like the state is in one of the most perfect spots for a hurricane just to pick up steam, and just like hit dead on. That's why Hugo was so bad in the 80s, right?
Yeah. Also, aren't we on earthquake plate? Very close to like the earthquake faults. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer.
Charleston is literally on a fault line. It was the great earthquake of 1907, which is
I remember.
If you go through, do you remember 1907?
I don't remember, but I remember being
Were you
told,
there?
Yes. We were there.
But if you look in Charleston, there's like the little bolts that are on like the earth.
The little black black things.
Yeah. So just another fun one.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
So
I thought this was going to be
we are overdue for an earthquake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought this was going to be a positive podcast today.
Oh no, this is not a fun one.
This is not.
For those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, me and Thomas so far have talked about Donald Trump losing. But like everything else going so poorly for the state.
Right.
And then in a podcast that'll come out later, we've just talked about how bad climate change is. So
so
things have not been bright around here.
They have not. But it's the truth. We have to tell the truth.
Yeah. So things aren't really getting better right now. So what can we do?
I think that's the question that we're resounding to, is in this brainstorming session that we like to think about a lot of times at the end of these are, what are the solutions? What are some practical real-time things, the day-to-day things that we can try to implement in something like this?
Yeah, and this one was a harder one. I know whenever we researched for other things, this just isn't on the top of a lot of people's minds. I don't think. It's not like at the top.
It should be.
It's probably not. I couldn't find like an NGO or a, you know, a nonprofit to even shout out off the top, like looking through like the first 5 pages of Google, because no one's really working on this in the way you would expect them to be, right? We've already seen the effects of on the tourism industry this year with the pandemic, or last year with the pandemic. Wow, 2021, what a time.
It's a time. It is.
This is something that like there needs to be some ground level work in. And I think the place where we can really start doing that is in petitioning our representatives at a state and local level, really, to one, start helping the workers who are doing these jobs, whether that's in advocating for like a $15 minimum wage or in advocating for more social security on a state level for those people. So whenever, you know, and I mean that in like the unemployment sense, right?
Right.
So if another disaster hits, these people aren't just left in the seats, unable to do their jobs.
Yeah, no, I think about the minimum wage thing, and that's something that was even a little controversial when Cunningham was in office. That's something he didn't vote to raise to the $15, but more of like, I think he talked about like an $11.50 or something like that. I know Clyburn's been a supporter of it. It's a little all over the place in terms of where we stand and where we want to go with that in South Carolina, but something I think would help. Yeah,
it would definitely help just the lives of workers. And there's this argument that happens that if you increase the minimum wage, then cost of living is going to increase. And that's just like not the point. That's like not the best way to go about it. But that's just not true. Right. Cost of living is going up no matter what. It's the wages that are stagnating. So we're not even keeping up with what, you know, we're still on the 19, I think it was the minimum wage where you go by the federal minimum wage and at $7.25 or whatever. I don't think that's been updated since like 90, since like maybe when Clinton took office.
Years. That's what I think. I think that's the last time. It has been years since that's updated, and that's frustrating. That's frustrating for people that rely on these jobs to be able to do that. And I really go back to this point of, since there's no unions in South Carolina, how to organize working class folks that are being disenfranchised and being disadvantaged by this really, really unfortunate system.
Right, and I think there needs to be maybe some work by like national unions to just start doing some groundwork in the state, right? We saw Boeing a couple years ago voted against the union, right? The Boeing plant in Charleston. There's unions are still can be like one of the most powerful political players who can one, influence politicians, but two, also fight for like workers.
Right.
There needs to be like a recalibration of that on like the national stage, and then, you know, start having the conversation here in South Carolina about like, why are we a right to work state? What does that even mean to us?
Exactly.
What good does that do? One, the state. What good does it do to the economy? Because you're just hurting people at that point.
Right. Because the fact that you can just walk in one day to your job and just get fired on the spot with no reasoning is it's kind of insane, but it's kind of this normalized culture that we just kind of gone with.
Yeah. And I think off of that, just like creating more jobs with like security, right? Like making it more legally enforceable for a company not to be able to fire someone on the spot for no good reason, or like fire someone on the spot on like circumstantial evidence, or fire someone on the spot because a disaster hit, right? Corporations don't deserve liabilities for everything.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think corporations, I think you would agree with me, corporations aren't people, you know? Like,
oh, they're not. Yeah. They're corporations for a reason.
We're no Mitt Romney here.
Oh, no, not far from it. And he's tried to be back, like, he's tried to be a good Republican again, but that's a whole nother conversation.
So like creating those jobs with more security just kind of built into them. But also, I think I'm going to put my own little climate plug in here.
As you should.
Yeah. As a state, and, you know, as a country, developing infrastructure, developing jobs that will create green infrastructure, will provide the benefits, will help people out in a way that, you know, all creating projects for people to do that will like help the economy and help the climate, right? I think that's something we could do tomorrow if we got a 30% increase in support for these kind of issues, but we don't
Yeah, no,
connect we don't connect tourism with the climate crisis, right? So and you know, the Green New Deal probably has something about tourism in there. I haven't read it for a minute now, but it's just something to think about, right? How can we connect that a little bit better?
That intersection is there, and I think when you're, especially in the South, I think when you're having mass scale problems like that affect a lot of people, when you make it intersectional and you're able to kind of cross between these two different paths that seem very different, it works, and you're able to really relate it to a lot of people. And I think, like all of these issues we talk about, it's kind of that understanding piece is a first important part to do it for folks in power, I believe, to make sure they really understand what's going on, because working class folks know what's happening and know what's going on and are not happy about this. So they understand the magnitude of what's going on. But how do we make sure that your local representatives and councilmen and state senators and people like that are working towards this fight as well?
Right. Yeah. So I think that's probably about it. That's probably about all I've got for today. Go ahead and support the state chapters of organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and the Human Rights Campaign. They're working on various issues, both for like workers' rights, but also for like LGBTQ rights and like stuff like that. So just good organizations to follow. We'll have that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
And then also just, consider supporting local politicians that seem to consider tourism as an issue, right? Like not, tourism, we can still have it, but like maybe we need to reframe it a bit. I guess that's probably the moral of this podcast.
Yeah,
tourism, inherently not bad, but the way it's been done, bad.
Bad, exactly. And I think once we reframe it and we break it down in a way that people are able to listen and think about, I think we're making some leeway in this bigger fight against a lot of corporations and a lot of big entities that are going to be tough to go up against.
Right. Well, alrighty. We'll have another episode out next Thursday. That one's Thomas's lead. He's talking about gerrymandering. So
I am gerrymandering. Get ready for that.
get ready for it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us and leave us a review. Give us a follow.
Yeah, let us know how we did. Give us the review on the hot takes or the bad things that we said.
I don't think the hot takes were that bad this time.
I don't think so either. I think this was just a general good reframing, like we said. I'm running that word in the ground, but of tourism and how we should think about it long term.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to let Thomas say anything wildly inappropriate. Bye. Why Not a Podcast is created and written by Thomas Marshall and Caleb Todd. Intro and outro music written and performed by Kevin McLeod. Consider making a donation to him through Creative Commons.